Okay, Jason, it's all yours.
Great. Thanks, Jim. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the November Mike and Key General Club meeting. Today's presentation, it'll be a great one, will be about Seattle ACS. So we've got Catherine Middleton Hardy, KJ7DYG, Seattle ACS Deputy Director, and Tim Helming, WT1IM, who's the Seattle ACS Director. They'll be presenting details on what is Seattle ACS, what it's all about, how you can get engaged, what they do, and the like. I'm going to read just a brief bio here about them, since nobody really likes talking about themselves, but this is from the presenters. So Catherine is a general class licensed ham and has a professional background as a scientist and clinical project manager. Catherine came to amateur radio through her emergency preparedness journey and involvement with community emergency communications hubs. Catherine hosts the ACS Central West Sector weekly net and has a particular interest in field exercises. Tim has been involved with emergency communications since shortly after receiving his first amateur license in 1991. By virtue of living in a part of the country with active weather patterns, New England, and participating in another heavily weather-influenced hobby, aviation, he spent a lot of time in Skywarn and FAA-sponsored weather training. He became active in VHF weather nets, a foreshadowing of later developments. Tim's interests in ham radio itself have spanned many aspects of the hobby, from HF to microwaves. Field day to rag chewing. I can't read my own writing. Rag chewing in the shack. Tim originally became involved with Seattle ACS in around 2014 and served as Southeast Sector Lead and PIO for the group. The professionalism and dedication of ACS cemented Tim's interest in emergency communications, and he is honored and humbled to lead the 140-member group into the next phase of evolution. By day, Tim works in the field of cybersecurity. He performs classical music, percussion, and enjoys wrangling his teenage kids and rambunctious puppy. Oh my, I know how that goes. Well, that's enough rambling for me. I'll turn it over to Tim and Catherine. Take it away, guys.
Awesome, thank you. So, Catherine, do you want me to put the slides up, or do you want to put them up?
I can give it a go. Let me just do that here. Okay, and then present. Right, so that looks like it's supposed to look, I think.
Perfect.
Brilliant. Okay, well, thank you so much for having us here today. We are going to share the presentation. I'll start, and then Tim will finish it off and interrupt if I miss something out. And I also want to acknowledge that Carl Leon is here in N7KUW, who is another Deputy Director for ACS. So here we go. Thanks for having us. So this is our agenda for what we're going to chat about this morning, and then we'll have questions at the end. We'll talk a little bit about who we are, our leadership, what we can do, and the type of volunteers that we're looking for. Okay, so this is our mission, and I need to move all these people because they're in the middle of it, but you guys can read. The mission of Seattle ACS is to provide communication support to the city of Seattle in times of emergency and disaster. And we also provide a variety of other supporting services to the Seattle Emergency Operations Center during actual activations or trainings. So ACS was founded by Mark Shepard in N7LYE. Many of you probably knew him very well. He had a history and experience with California wildland management in the 80s and 90s. But then coming to Seattle, he joined City of Seattle as an employee, and he founded Seattle ACS originally as with the idea of it being an Aries group, but realized that there was a lot of potential for it to be more than that. So Seattle ACS is actually part of the Office of Emergency Management. We are a volunteer group fully incorporated into the Office of Emergency Management. And because of Mark's vision, we have an expanded role compared to other Aries or Races groups. And we can talk about what that means in a minute. So our leadership team, you've already met Tim. He is our new director. The deputy directors are me, Carl, and Dave Wilmer. We have our technical team lead, Doug Kingston, PIO, Susanna Cunningham, and George Thornton is the coordinator for our sectors. And we'll talk about our sectors also in a minute. We have around 140 members. There's a little fluctuation there with a core of around 40 very active members. We are organized by city sector, and we have a variety of different interests within the group, and those people tend to get together, and we have teams doing different focus within the organization. So in terms of our technical capabilities, we have a lot of infrastructure that we have installed and managed, as well as we partner with other organizations who have infrastructure that we can use. So we have a network of VHF and UHF repeaters, amateur radio frequency repeaters throughout the city. The goal being that someone with an HT can get coverage from anywhere in the city and have that wider reach. Many of those repeaters are maintained by ACS, and some are through partner organizations. We also maintain the EOC radio room down at the Office of Emergency Management, which has amateur radio equipment as well as a lot of other public service equipment. And our members are trained how to use that equipment, and we also maintain it for the EOC and OEM. We also have data capabilities. We use WinLink extensively, which is the radio email system, and we have nodes throughout the city and in the Puget Sound region. We also have HamWAN as one of our core capabilities, which is a network-based system over amateur radio frequencies. So there is a Puget Sound data ring which runs on HamWAN. We also utilize FL Digi and FL Message as a way of communicating bulletins and data files to our members and other partner groups. So our volunteers are responsible for maintaining a lot of this equipment and installing it. There are a couple of photos here of a work party we had installing a large HF antenna. You can see Jim is down there too. This was at North Seattle College during the summer. So we have a lot of active members who are not just using the radio, but also installing and managing all this equipment. So this is a graphic of how we are organized by sector, as well as rough locations of our repeater installations. So you'll see we have a distribution of our members throughout the city. We are very interested in recruiting more members in the South End. We have a lot of members in the North End that are active, but are looking to get more in the South End. You see the red R's are our repeater sites. Some of them are the amateur UHF, VHF. We also have nodes in there. Some are GMRS repeaters, which we use through our partner groups. And there are also some OEM-owned commercial repeaters that we help with. We do have a variety of different types of power backup at these facilities. We are looking in the future to have all of these facilities on with power generation capabilities. We're nearly there. A couple more still need to have those installed on them, but all our sites have battery backup. Okay, so I'll start with the routine and public service activities, and then Tim can take it away on emergency stuff. That's right with him. So what do we do in peacetime? So we have a lot of activities that we use to help our members stay active, test their skills and their equipment. So routinely, we have a Monday night net at 1900 on PSRG repeater, which is linked for our net. And once a month, we have a multi-repeater net where one of the sectors will take responsibility to choose a handful of repeaters or simplex frequencies. And all of our members will have this expanded chance to expand their testing for that evening of different repeaters in different areas. We also have a monthly meeting where we have business as well as educational topics on current or upcoming technologies or regulations from the FCC, things like that. We have regular work groups you've seen to upgrade and maintain our systems. And then we are very, even during COVID, we did a lot of exercises from home where we practiced doing WinLink, formal messaging, 213s, as well as just simplex, checking our simplex reach. We have a plan to do many more of those in the next year. And are looking forward to having an exercise in alignment with the Cascadia Rising exercise next year. Our members are very active for public service, using amateur radio to support the communications for many races. These can be running or cycling, also parades. There are many opportunities to get out and practice your skills. We also have additional training through OEM, where we can provide different support functions within the EOC that are not radio related directly. And then, Tim, did you want to start here?
Happy to. Thank you, Catherine. Thanks for that great overview. So this gives us sort of a sense of where we fit in among the different structures that are part of an emergency response and emergency preparedness. So, and there are aspects of these things that we emphasize to the membership of Seattle ACS. So the foundation for all of this, of course, is individual and family preparedness. And not only do we try to provide information for our membership on best practices and equipment and so forth for individual and family preparedness, as well as radio stuff. But we also stress that during an activation, if a real event has taken place, your first order of business is to take care of yourself and take care of your family. We also work, or we expect our members will probably be hooked into various aspects of community preparedness. And so there's not a direct ACS relationship with, for example, SNAP groups or church or school groups or things like that. But these are organizations that, again, are going to play a fairly fundamental role in a major emergency. And so we know that there will be a certain amount of interaction and also probably obligation that our members have with some of the other groups that they are part of. Then the Seattle Emergency Hubs, which many of you are probably familiar with and many of you may well be members of, a really important organization for preparedness. Probably, I think it's safe to say the biggest response from the standpoint of organized grassroots groups is going to be through the hubs. In terms of sheer numbers, it may be that organizations like churches and whatnot have more involvement, but from an organized and connected to city type functions, the emergency hubs are it. And so ACS has had a long relationship with the hubs organization. It's going through some evolution right now, but it's been an important partnership for us. And then up there at the top of the pyramid is the City of Seattle Office of Emergency Management, and ACS, as Catherine mentioned, is attached to OEM. And so in some ways, the least will happen up there at the top in terms of number of humans involved with the response. But of course, some of the primary information that needs to flow out to the community is going to come from the top of the pyramid there. And of course, there's a need for information to flow back up to it as well. And so a big part of what Seattle ACS is all about is managing and facilitating that flow of information in both directions that ultimately makes it down to the citizenship of Seattle. So let's jump to the next slide. And to give you an idea of some of the organizations that we serve and interact with, even though OEM is sort of part of is what we're under as an umbrella, we regularly interact with the organizations that you see here: the Department of Transportation, Parks, Public Utilities, the Fire Department, Seattle City Light, and on a sort of less frequent, but certainly as needed basis, other city departments and related, sometimes county departments, et cetera. And also some partners that are not part of the city itself, but of course are important partners to us, whether that is the emergency hubs, the Red Cross, the medical services team. Another one that we exercise with semi-regularly that's not depicted here is the National Weather Service, who, as you would imagine, have a really strong presence in the OEM and in the Emergency Operations Center during any kind of event that either is weather related or where weather is going to play a role. For example, the earthquake happened and now it's about to be an atmospheric river. And so sheltering becomes even more challenging than it usually is, that kind of thing. So all of these arrows back and forth involve potential message traffic that we might be handling in an exercise or a real event. Next slide. Yeah. Okay. So Catherine covered some of the, I like how you put it, in peacetime activities that we do in Seattle ACS. So what happens when things get exciting on an emergency basis, or whenever we may need our membership to respond to these things? We provide the links that were represented in some of those arrows in the triangle slide between the city and the neighborhoods and the other organizations that are part of the whole response. We do this over voice, FM voice, on the ham frequencies, on those repeaters that you saw on the map. Catherine mentioned HamWAN, and we are working to, incorporate HamWAN into more of what we do as we go forward, as well as potentially other IP connectivity modes. So a lot of Seattle ACS folks have been playing with Arden. Maybe some Mike and Key folks have been playing with Arden as well. We have not adopted Arden as a core technology, but it's under consideration because it's another pretty good way and has some capabilities that HamWAN does not, specifically in terms of meshing nodes together to provide IP connectivity, which is really fundamental to part of the vision for ACS, which is ultimately sort of, we see the grand slam home run being if our served agencies can work almost as if nothing had happened to the communication infrastructure, because we're able to provide the transport layer that lets them use the tools they already are familiar with using, instead of having to shift over to, FM voice and pencil and paper and stuff like that. Of course, we have the ability to fall back to that, but if we can provide things like VoIP telephones that, get dial tone and can be dialed to other organizations, and being able to use web EOC or other computer related technologies, that's really what we want to be able to have happen. In an emergency, of course, there's going to be a lot of contention for frequencies. And so we will help coordinate the use of the ham frequencies that are primary to us within the city boundaries during emergencies and also during drills. So there'll be, there's an expectation. There are a lot of repeaters that have the W7 ACS call sign on them. And we expect that those will largely be available, but of course we don't know, right? In a big giant event, we may have everybody who owns a Bofang around here up on all the repeaters. So we will have quite a job to do to make sure we're coordinating how the different frequencies are being used, and to be a little bit nimble in that respect, just based on what's going on. Providing communications support to the city and those other agencies that were in the boxes. So this is where, as Catherine mentioned, Amateur is not the only frequency sets that we use. We have equipment on the 800 megahertz band, both permanently installed at the radio room at the EOC, as well as a few of us have handhelds on the 800 megahertz system. The state has a VHF low band setup called SEMNet, and that facilitates a lot of EOC to EOC type communication around the state. PCERN is coming soon, which is going to be the new generation replacing the current 800 megahertz system. Carl is very deeply involved in training on PCERN and assisting with that rollout. And then there are a couple of other systems that we may be involved with also. NAWAS is a government system, and then MARS. Some of you might be MARS members, right? The Military Auxiliary Radio Service. And all of those could become part of the response. We've also got shares licenses and some equipment that can work on shares. I don't have that on the slide here, but for those who may not be as familiar, shares is a FEMA administered program that enables various HF frequencies to be used for emergency communications. It has an entirely different licensing and call sign structure and so forth. It's not amateur radio, although some ham gear can be modified if you have the proper license to use shares, and shares works in conjunction with ALE, so automatic link enablement technology. So it's got some interesting promise as far as HF connectivity, especially given that HF is challenging right now. As anybody on this call who's an HF enthusiast knows, we're not in the juicy part of the sunspot cycle. So we're going to have our hands full with dealing with the need for HF if that need arises, which it certainly could. And we will be part of the support for everything the city is doing by way of response and recovery operations. So that could look like ACS members at specific gathering points around the city, which the city designates as with the term rally points. The city's actual plan for how it's going to use rally points is still evolving. So my thought on that is that we need to stay nimble and consider different deployment models, such as perhaps we have ACS members who get attached at the hip to certain key Seattle employees. If there isn't other communication available, they can buddy up with an ACS member and be at whatever location they need to be at and operate that way. So we're looking at a variety of different ways that our response model might be built based on the specific scenario. And then also, as Catherine mentioned, there are some non-radio related support services that we provide to the EOC. Running the AV system always comes up as sort of the prime example of that, but we do everything from that to helping clean up the trash or set out the lunch, when there's lunch or dinner or whatever during an activation. Essentially, we have a few people on staff at the Emergency Operations Center during an activation if we're asked to, and we're available to basically be the friendly person that says, hey, I'm here, put me to work. I can do anything you need me to do within the limits of my skill set. And if that's talking on the radio, that's great. And if it's helping crush down pizza boxes, we'll do that too. All right, next slide, please. So what do we expect of the folks who are part of ACS? Well, of course, as was mentioned in my little bio, this is one of the things that attracted me, and I think attracts a lot of people to ACS, is the professionalism and character that the members of this group have. So we're looking for folks who really will operate in a very professional manner. Something that Carl mentions during our new member orientations, which I always like, is that our vision, and I think we hit this reasonably well, is that during an activation, Seattle ACS folks are essentially indistinguishable from the folks who are getting a paycheck from the city in terms of how we carry ourselves and operate in the EOC during those times. We want to be people that they can rely on and trust and work very smoothly with. And so this is just part of the ethos of the organization. In terms of our expectations, some of them are really straightforward. We do require folks to have a valid ham radio license, and we require the completion of these foundational FEMA ICS courses, 100, 200, and 700, which can be done on a self-study basis on their website. So those are prerequisites. And then there is a background check. It's a relatively lightweight background check, but we do that because our folks may be responding among vulnerable populations, and we have to make sure that anybody that is part of Seattle ACS is safe to do that. And then in return for that, there is some protection that's really important that's provided to ACS members. Basically, all of our volunteers get registered as emergency workers under the part of the administrative code that's listed here. And so this means that when we are logged in on an exercise or on a real event, anytime we're kind of logged in as an ACS member, we have some protections for ourselves, for our property liability, and so forth. We're protected by Good Samaritan laws, and also, if you're in the course of an ACS response and you drop your handy-talkie and it gets run over by a truck, well, there may be some funds available to replace that handy-talkie because of the protection that we have under this program. So that's a really valuable part of what's offered as well. Okay, so what makes a person sort of more generically a good EmComm volunteer? These are some of the things we're looking at. We want to see folks with a variety of backgrounds, and there's a lot of different kinds of skills and experience that are involved in what we're doing. And just to take an easy example of that from a technical point of view, one of the evolutions that we're seeing is increasing importance in IP networking. And so we're looking for folks that are good at, routing and switching and shoving packets around in general on IP networks. That, 20 years ago, that wouldn't have been as much of a focus, probably not really from a practical purpose, a focus at all. There was experimentation, of course, with TCP/IP over radio almost as long as there's been TCP/IP, but it's starting to become absolutely fundamental to how we construct our response model. And so we're looking for folks who aren't just good at ham radio, but being good at ham radio is valuable. And then even if we stay within the realm, for example, of voice, there are people that are very comfortable and good at being net control operators. There are other people that don't want to do that, but are very good at being out in the field and making reports and that sort of thing. So this variety of backgrounds and experiences, et cetera, is really important to us. The desire to help is really fundamental, right? That drives, if you have that true desire to help, then that motivates the other things that you do. It gives you a can-do attitude. It gives you a helpful attitude and lets you express that professionalism that we were talking about. Teamwork is so vital, right? We can't have a bunch of folks working in isolation. We have to work smoothly as a team, being able to take direction from others, either others within ACS or others within our served agencies that we're working with. Folks who can operate well under stressful circumstances, because when the big one hits, it's going to be really, really stressful. And we get smaller tastes of that in any situation where things are moving fast. So if you're responding in in the marathon or a bike race or something like that, and you've got an athlete in trouble, and you've got maybe a couple of those going on at the same time on the course, things can start moving pretty quickly, and the ability to stay calm and stay focused when all of that is happening is really important. And then the last one is also really, really important. It's not uncommon in volunteer groups to get people who like to sort of express authority and wear a badge and use it as though they're in charge. And we want to make sure that that's not part of kind of how we operate. We are helpers. We're not decision makers. Within ACS, there are some decision makers as leaders of the group, but in general, we are there to serve the agencies that we're serving. And so having that understanding and understanding the fine line between being able to be accountable and function at a high level and a very professional level without sort of being a bossy boots when that's not your place to be is really important in what we look for in our volunteers and in general as good EmComm volunteers. Let's keep going.
I think that's it.
I think that was it. Yeah. So we are open for Q&A.
Tim, this is Sam, N7RHE. I have an observation and a question.
Sure.
The emergency preparedness pyramid, the bottom two tiers look like CERT to me.
Mm-hmm.
And then secondly, in your badging, are you using the new King County standard?
Yes. Okay. So to both of those points, first of all, yeah, the bottom layers of the pyramid absolutely look like CERT. CERT is not really happening much within Seattle, at least at the level that ACS is operating with. So, and I think it used to be more, but it's not the case now. And Catherine or Carl may be able to add more color on that, and I will turn it over to you in just a second. Sorry, I'm forgetting. What was the second question?
Badging.
Sorry?
Oh, badging.
Oh, the badging. Yeah. Yes, I believe that actually the badges are run through King County. Carl, can you confirm that?
Yeah, we're using the same salamander-based badging system that King County uses for all volunteers
Right.
and for other entities also. So I don't know if it'll show with the virtual background. You know, it's that kind of a badge.
Yeah.
So
it's very interesting because I'm a member of the team that supports Puget Sound Regional Fire Authority emergency management, and some of our requirements are all the FEMA things you mentioned, but we require CERT also.
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Gotcha.
we don't require CERT, but there is commonality to the criteria, the credentialing and everything. So, and that credential is valid, not just in almost any place in King
Right.
County,
Right.
nationwide. It's a system that's fairly commonly recognized. So you go
Right.
any place with that badge, people will look at it and recognize that you're part of the team, if you will. And within King County, anybody that has it, we know is already a registered volunteer or a registered volunteer emergency worker. And we can sign them in on our roster, or they could sign us in on their roster transparently, without having to jump through any hoops, because we're already credentialed on a common standard basis.
Right. We don't have our new badges yet. They're in progress, but what people don't realize is that once the EOCs are equipped, all you have to do is walk in with that badge with the QR code on it, and they can look you up instantly.
Right. Seattle OEM is not using that like for EOC access, but Seattle ACS is using it. And if you came in as a communications volunteer, we would scan you in with that QR code. Yes.
Right. Thank you.
We had a few questions that popped up here on the chat. Christopher AE7XQ had a question of how does this fit into the Pierce County model? He's part of the Pierce County areas.
Sure. So we at the Seattle EOC would flow up usually to King County EOC for resource requests and things like that. So we would be primarily dealing with that sort of hierarchical structure, but that doesn't mean that you can't talk to anybody else. So we are many of our members are part of the EmComm community, which are members who have been trained in the FEMA ICS method of incident response. That is more in alignment with emergency management. So I don't know what Pierce County Aries has done in that regard, but Jim, you have your hand up.
So I was just going to mention, since Mike and Key is over the Puget Sound region, I'm going to start a new group within Mike and Key, looking for Aries members, ACS members, kind of have an area like that to where we can kind of cross collaborate and share information, best practices, things like that. Maybe even have a couple of nets going through the Mike and Key repeater. So I know that may be a little bit of new news to the ACS, but was one of the goals that I'd like to get going again.
And I'll also mention that, and this is in collaboration with the AUXCOM folks that Catherine mentioned, we're also looking at how do we build closer partnerships with the neighboring communities, and maybe that goes to things like working with them to designate specific interop frequencies that we'll use to talk to Shoreline, to talk to Bellevue, to talk to Mercer Island, to talk to Bainbridge Island, Highline, Renton, et cetera. So those are things that we're interested in. And then also, as Catherine mentioned, leading up to Cascadia Rising, where the actual government play in Cascadia Rising is going to be substantially less and nil in many cases compared to 2016. That doesn't stop us from having our own big Cascadia Rising, and we're very interested in that. So you'll see more about that as it gets closer.
Great, thanks. Carl, you had your hand up first.
Yes, one of the distinctions between ACS and Aries, ACS associates to a specific served agency. In the case of Seattle ACS, we're serving Seattle, Office of Emergency Management in the city of Seattle. Whereas an Aries team can kind of float, if you will, or become a resource to any of multiple potential served agencies. So I think that's one of the important distinctions. We're all amateur radio operators. We all have the same basic guidelines. In fact, ARRL over the last couple of years has made a significant change in their approach to Aries and the credentialing and training to make them more focused on serving served agencies. With ACS, we start out by being part of the served agency. Seattle ACS isn't going to go help King County or anybody else directly unless we are requested through emergency management channels, whereas an Aries team would be deployable through ARRL agreements and relationships.
Great, thanks. George, you had your hand up?
Don't forget.
Sorry, I had to unmute.
There you go.
I've been a member of Seattle ACS for a number of years, and I find it to be a really fine place with which to do practical, real-world public service work. And I'm just really pleased with the organization, pleased with the way it functions. They have really smart, effective team members. Our focus is specifically on supporting the city of Seattle as an agency of the Seattle government, and that gives us access to equipment and facilities. If anybody's ever been see an interesting event, go down to the EOC in the middle of an activation. Seattle has a huge emergency operations center with computer screens, television screens all over the place, and sections for police, fire, public utilities, everything else. Just an amazing place with which to work. And we have our own room to the side of that, which is a fairly substantial radio room, with multiple stations and capability of working on all kinds of frequencies. And we can mobilize a group of 50 people to get out there in the community if something happens. I've seen it in operation a few times. It's an amazing thing. And if you're interested in specifically in EmComm and are interested in focusing on the city of Seattle, it's a great place to be and a great place to work. It's not a substitute for what Mike and Key does, which has a much broader focus and does a lot of work involving active contesting and things like that, and has the best field day installation in the nation. But if your focus is on EmComm work, It's a great place to go and a great organization to belong with. It doesn't have politics in it because you're basically, it's a hierarchical organization. You're not going to go in there and get elected to anything. You're just going to go there and work and be around some good people. Anyway, that's all I got to say.
Thanks, George.
Who
Actually,
let
that's
the
a good-
dogs out?
Yeah, the dogs had their own comments.
Hey, actually segues really well into another question that came through the chat from Sam, K7IFI. Is Seattle ACS limited to members who live in or near Seattle? What's the radius around Seattle where you're looking for members?
Yeah, so that's a great question. We do have members who are outside of the city of Seattle. So it is not strictly limited. We want to emphasize folks within the city limits to the extent that we can. And as Catherine mentioned, we have certain parts of town that are not as well covered as others. So those are going to be areas of real concentration for us in boosting our membership. But having said that, if you're interested and you're in one of the neighboring communities, you're within radio reach of Seattle, you very well could be put to work as a relay station, providing observation. Who knows? It's possible that there would be a place for you to be involved. So yeah, if you're interested, approach us and let's have a conversation. If you're on this Zoom from Ohio, probably not going to be able to make that work. Thanks for your interest. But if you're in, Mercer Island or Bellevue or something like that, or Renton, let's talk. That's what I would say.
Wonder if there's a reach out. I'm in Sammamish, so I'd be curious, but good stuff.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. And I think those were all the questions so far in the chat. Carl, you have your hands up again.
Yeah, 2 quick comments. First, to being in or near Seattle. If you work in Seattle, no matter how far away you live, if you're in Seattle for a reason on a regular routine basis, where you might expect to be in Seattle during an earthquake or a disaster, you're welcome to be part of ACS because you have a geographic proximity in your professional life or your personal life. That's just as important as living in the city. And then I wanted to comment briefly on the EOC versus all the other stuff we do. If you want to be the person that comes in and works in the EOC as part of that team, we welcome that interest and involvement, but that's not a mandate for an ACS member. If you want to be the guy that's out in the field and that's all you want to do and you never want to set foot in the EOC, well, we have a perfect role for you in ACS for that also. So it's all part of the collective team that makes things happen. And it's a lot of fun to be in the EOC, but it's not a requirement or a mandate if that doesn't interest you at all. And Tim left, so I'm going to throw it to Catherine.
I do have a follow-up question to that is, how does the EOC handle or work with folks with accessibility needs, maybe people who are visually impaired or what have you, and how does Seattle ACS incorporate inclusivity and accessibility?
Right, so that's a big issue. So the city of Seattle is very committed to inclusion. So they have a lot of emphasis on that in all of their training materials and their policies and planning. The EOC itself is a new building. Carl, I think you were part of when they rebuilt that building, so you may have more information about the planning for that. But we are currently working to evaluate ourselves in terms of inclusion and equity and diversity. So that is an initiative that has started but is ongoing. So I'm not sure I can make any kind of official claims to any of that at this time. Yeah.
Gotcha.
The EOC is a physically accessible building. Transportation is fairly good to it. There's light rail is just 2 blocks away. Bus lines are nearby, so it's a reasonably accessible facility, and it does have ramps and wheelchair access and stuff like that with no problem. As far as to visually impaired or hearing impaired, that challenge during an EOC activation. There's nothing that precludes people that have limitations from participating, but at the same time, the general functionality of an EOC is a group of people who have those capabilities, and it would be challenging to work in there if you were sight impaired or hearing impaired to a significant degree. That's not to say that they would limit you, but that's more of a city function than an ACS function to make that happen and to implement that type of any kind of limitations. Tim, the question was about disabilities and working in the EOC.
Yeah, no, it sounds like you've handled it quite well. Thank you.
Great, thanks, guys. Any other questions from folks?
Let me pop in real quick. So again, I'm going to try to get a couple of new groups going. One of them will be bringing together the different emergency communications groups and getting some web pages up for contacts to if you're interested in joining any of those. And then the other section that I want to get started is the preparation. We've seen flooding, we've seen wind events. We want to have some preparation there. So I'm going to get a couple of new groups going in the Mike and Key group so that we can pull in people from different areas that Mike and Key has coverage in. So look forward to some emails inviting you guys to join these different groups.io pages.
That'll be exciting, Jim. Thanks.
Comment, Jim.
Yeah, go ahead.
Mike and Key has a diverse membership that covers a lot of geography in Western Washington.
Yep.
And a comment that was a little earlier in this group from somebody was with regard to all of the geographically close related different entities having to share amateur radio frequencies and effectively utilize them. And in a major event, that's going to be a real challenge. It seems like everybody says, oh, that's my frequency. Oh, that's my simplex. Oh, that's, and an effort that has been started several times and has always failed is a good, effective working group that can coordinate and resolve the use of simplex frequencies and
Yes.
repeater frequencies regionally.
Right.
And there are a lot of potential solutions where we can even use the same frequency if we tone guard and things like that. So
yes,
that's something I see. If you
that's
begin
what I'm.
your emergency preparedness group in Mike and Key, and with the diversity of membership you have, the potential to get the right people at the table to actually bring that to fruition finally, it's something John Bromberg has tried from Eastside Fire and Sammamish and certain, heavily in certain stuff. He's tried repeatedly to make that happen without success. I know several other people have. Boy, it would be a benefit if that's something that Mike and Key could actually help bring to the table and bring a resolution to. So to everybody here that is part of different communities and different groups, keep that in mind. It's something we really need to do if we ever hope to communicate effectively in a real emergency.
Yeah, and that's one of the goals that I am really looking forward to trying to do. And I'll get up to the plate and give it a swing and try to work with the different groups and come up with a interoperability 217 form that, we can dedicate out some frequencies and work together as a team, and then have a couple of primary frequencies like Mike and Key that, have the coverage of the entire Puget Sound. So yeah, I'm looking forward to trying to, we'll give it a swing and see if we can't get it going. And
So Jim,
yeah,
there is an EmComm group of members who are from different groups around the area who are looking to coordinate on the 217. So we should coordinate on that to make sure we're not duplicating efforts here.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely.
There's been a major issue with people thinking that since they practice and everything on a given repeater, that was theirs in an emergency and nobody else could use it. Surprise.
Yeah, Gil, absolutely. I mean, this is one of the reasons why we've been spending some resources and time on 6 meters in Seattle ACS, because we think 6 is going to be less congested than 2 meters and 440, in part because, you know, you can't go out and easily buy a $30 handheld that does 6 meters. And if you do, have fun with that rubber duck on 6 meters. So that's one of the areas that we've put a bit of focus over the last couple of years, between practicing on simplex every Monday evening for the last many months now. And Puget Sound Repeater Group has just put up their own 6 meter repeater, and we have some other of the local 6 meter repeaters on our ICS 217. But yeah, coordinating the frequencies is going to be a big deal.
A lot of cats to herd.
Yeah.
Looks like Sam has his hand up.
Tim, this might be a sensitive subject, but in Kent, we've had trouble when we've done the Fifth Saturday exercises and other type things, getting any response out of King County AOC in the Renton Islands. Have you had a problem with that?
You know, we have not really been participating in the Fifth Saturday drills since COVID time. We want to sort of get back going on that again. So we don't really have, Carl or Catherine might have a little bit more data here, but we just don't have much data, yes or no, to that question. But as we kind of, now that we're getting back to in-person operations a bit more, we'll get a better feel for that.
The King County KCECC is not the optimum place for RF. They have a challenge getting any antennas up. They've really been fighting that. So they've got some limited radio capability there, but not a lot of HF, and even with VHF, UHF limited on their antenna capabilities. So Seattle ACS doesn't directly support King County ECC, but I know Jason down there and several other people, and I know they have ongoing challenges in that area.
Yeah, I know we're having trouble getting external antennas on our EOC and Kent, but that's more of a political thing with the building ownership.
Speaking of political, there's a direct message question that I've received, and it's about the DNR things that are happening right now. The latest on the DNR is that there's some sites that were oversubscribed, so to speak, and they are needing to be taken down and will be worked on to get things set up again properly. And there's a lot of different comments and emails going around, and that's all I have to say on that. A lot of political stuff that needs to be worked out and redone accordingly.
That's right. You know, and to be on the conservative side, we have to just assume that those sites are not going to come back and be available to us. If we are happily surprised through the efforts of, you know, Scott Dakers or others to maybe appeal at least some of that decision and get some equipment sort of retained, that would be great. But we're all assuming that it's all going to go poof pretty soon here.
Hey Tim, I also wanted to mention our the Seattle ACS connections with the local hubs, and I'm a member of the Rainier Beach hub. I also wanted to try to bring a little bit of that into the mix, because I know ACS works with the hubs, and at least once a year we try to have an exercise. And I have mentioned to several folks at Mike and Key that we do have that as another area to communicate with our families and things, getting a GMRS license and having that local in the neighborhood, using the hub communication, and then speak to you know, somebody that's a ham and that has the connections into Seattle ACS. So I kind of want to have some of that stuff going on too.
And the Rainier Beach hub has been a great hub to work with. I used to live fairly close to there, and Ron Angelis, who's in charge of it, is an awesome guy. And they've got good stuff going there. Catherine, you may be able to speak to this a little bit. I mentioned that there's some sort of some evolution going on within the hubs as far as specifically how they're using radio. And I think you're going to see a little bit less of that, at least for a while. But Catherine, you can put this best. So why don't I turn it over to you?
Sure. So during COVID, the Hubs group attempted to be very active, and because they also had grant money that they had been awarded, they were able to bring on a lot of volunteers, including some new hub sites from scratch. So those volunteers had their first exercise this September. So it was a big learning curve for all of those new members. And through that process, at the Hub's leadership, speaking for them, that they realized they needed to resolve some of their internal process questions. And because their process has evolved over time, it's also diverged. There are some hub groups that are using a different process from others, which in theory is fine, but if they're doing coordinated training, it would be easier if they're on the same page. So there's a big effort by the hub group now to have focus groups on the different areas within the hub process. How do they coordinate information? How do they coordinate volunteers? They are trying to match resources and needs. That's a whole nother project for them. So there's a lot of internal reorganization and development happening. And because radio can be distracting, because it's so much fun and shiny toys, it's at this time, it's sort of being put to the side while they focus on everything else. And then after that's sorted out, the radio part will be reevaluated, and we'll figure out what the new operating mode is. But the hubs are great. I'm a member of a hub. I think Carl's a member of a hub. Tim's been by a hub. Jim is. Hubs are awesome. Definitely be involved with your local hub. You can do both. You can be in emergency communications and be a hub person, not at the same time. If you're on a mission, you are with ACS. But definitely find out where your hub is if you're in the Seattle area. And Carl has his hand up, and so does George.
I think George had his hand up first, and then I'll go.
Okay. I've been serving as what we call the sector lead sector team chair for ACS. And what that means is we're focusing on neighborhood building. And the neighborhood building means we spend a lot of time working together with the other ham community who live in our immediate neighborhood, which gives us a great possibility for make better connections. We happen to have a very strong connection in my particular sector, which covers Queen Anne and Magnolia and mostly. And I know that working with the hubs is a part of what we try to do. And we have a lot of people who work with what they call MAQUA, which is Magnolia, Interbay, and Queen Anne hub group. And there's a lot of active going both directions. I think building community was what this is all about. The hubs have a somewhat different focus than what we need to do. Sometimes there's a bit of a conflict of interest because when we need people operating radios, we don't want them out to serve our function. We don't need them out there working radios for the hub, which is a different function. So getting people choices and where to go and all that is part of the normal sorting out process. But I think generally building community is what it's all about, and establishing close relations with your neighbors. So if an emergency happens, there's this effect called the island effect. If we get in a place like Seattle, you get a big earthquake, all the bridges go down, all of a sudden you're a little island to yourself, and you only have your neighbors to rely on. So we're building structures to make that work. And that's a lot of our activity. And it's what I'm doing as sector lead, trying to develop that.
Yeah.
Anyway,
look at West Seattle and the bridge being out.
Right.
That's an island now.
West
Right.
Seattle, for sure, Magnolia.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, George. Let's wrap with Carl, and we'll close it out and take a break and go on to Carl. Up to you.
Okay, real quickly, keep in mind the hubs are, first of all, they're a grassroots, volunteer, citizen-run effort. They are not managed by the city or run by the city. and there's no official connection between the city and the hubs or ACS and the hubs. But the city is strongly supportive of the hubs, and the hub community has close working relationship with a number of city departments. Secondly, the hub is primarily a neighborhood needs and resources matching entity. That's what a hub's foundational role is. It's for people in that immediate community to meet and help each other. I can do this, I need this, whatever. That's the core function of a hub. Communications by radio is a ancillary function to support that core function. So hubs, like Catherine noted, that's not their priority. It's a secondary function, and ACS is happy to support them to the extent we can. And but you know, that's all I wanted to comment, and I thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Carl.
Let me add one last comment. So I think we'll go ahead and Catherine, I am splitting a couple of different functions here. I'm a member of both, and I haven't been able to keep up with my local hub. So that's news to me about the radio thing, so I appreciate that. So I think I'm going to put the hubs and that function into the preparedness section of the new stuff that I'm going to try to get.
Cool.
And thank you guys for, keeping this going with this.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. So we'll end up, we'll post this this presentation or this video up on our Mike and Key YouTube channel. And if Tim and Catherine are gracious enough to share with us the slide deck, I'll post that up on the Mike and Key Group's IO page after this a little later. And we'll get that going. So thank you, Tim, Catherine, Carl, George, sharing information about Seattle ACS. Sounds really cool.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
It was fun.
You bet. Well, guys, I have 11:01 on my clock. Why don't we take a break? Why don't we come back together at, why don't we say 11:07? And we'll get going with the business side of things. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.